The first time I saw him, I thought he was already dead. Snow had fallen all night, enough to swallow the narrow forest path and silence the woods completely. Even the wind seemed reluctant to disturb the fragile white stillness. My breath fogged the air as I trudged forward, my basket of herbs growing heavier with every step. I should have turned back earlier. Winter in these mountains was merciless, and dusk was approaching faster than I liked. But then I saw something dark against the snow. At first, I assumed it was a fallen branch. Then I noticed the shape was wrong, too small, too still. My chest tightened. I set down my basket and approached carefully, boots crunching softly through the frozen crust. As I drew closer, the shape resolved into a thin bundle of torn cloth, something that might once have been a robe, now stiff with ice. And inside it, a child. He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. Dark hair matted with frozen blood clung to his face. His skin was so pale it seemed almost blue, lips cracked and bloodless. One arm was twisted beneath him at an angle that made my stomach lurch. But what froze me in place wasn't the injuries. It was the faint, unnatural chill radiating from him. Not the cold of winter, but something deeper, heavier, as if the air itself recoiled from his presence. And beneath that chill, I caught the barest hint of his scent, smoke and ash and something ancient, unmistakably alpha, though still immature. He was a demon, I realized. A young one, wounded, dying, and terrifying. For one terrible moment, I wondered if he might be something I shouldn't touch. Then I saw his chest move. Barely, but it moved. Alive. Oh no. The words slipped out before I could stop them. I dropped to my knees beside him, snow soaking instantly through the fabric of my trousers. Carefully, I brushed the frozen hair away from his face. His eyelashes fluttered weakly, and then his eyes opened. They were not the eyes of a child. Dark, so dark they seemed to swallow the fading light, ringed faintly with a deep crimson glow that flickered like embers buried beneath ash. Not confusion, not fear. Hatred. Raw, instinctive, animal hatred. Sharp enough to make my breath catch. My omega instincts screamed at me to run, to submit, to get away from this dangerous alpha creature. But something else held me in place. Compassion, maybe, or the stubborn refusal to abandon someone who clearly had never known kindness. His lips parted slightly, and a faint rasp escaped, more breath than sound. Go away. My heart broke a little. Not because he told me to leave, but because even that tiny effort clearly cost him everything he had left. His alpha pheromones were wild, uncontrolled, spiking with pain and fear. You're hurt, I said softly. I'm not going to leave you here. His gaze sharpened, something feral flickering beneath the exhaustion. For a heartbeat, it felt as if the air grew heavier, pressing down on my lungs. My omega instincts flared again. Danger, threat, powerful alpha, but I forced them down. Die, he whispered. The word carried no strength, no threat, just a grim certainty, as if death were the only outcome he understood. Not today, I replied gently. I slipped my arms beneath him as carefully as I could. He was lighter than I expected, too light, like someone who hadn't eaten properly in a very long time. For a split second, his body tensed, a faint tremor running through him. Not resistance, but instinct. Like a wild animal bracing for pain. It's okay, I murmured. I've got you. His fingers twitched weakly against my sleeve. Then his head fell against my shoulder. The faint chill around him seeped through my clothes, biting against my skin. But I ignored it and gathered him closer, shielding him from the wind. Let's go home. By the time I reached the edge of the village, night had fully fallen. Lanterns glowed warmly behind shuttered windows, smoke curling from chimneys, the comforting scent of cooking drifting faintly through the cold air. Normally, the sight would have eased the ache in my bones. Tonight, dread settled in its place. Because villagers notice things. and a blood-covered child carried in someone's arms was not something easily ignored. Sure enough, the first person to spot me was old Martha, who had been securing her gate against the wind. She squinted through the dim light, then stiffened. Rowan Hart? What in heaven's name? She stepped closer and saw the child. Her face drained of color. Where did you find that? On the mountain path, I said. He's injured. I need to get him inside. You can't bring that thing here. The sharpness in her tone made me blink. That's a demon. Can't you feel it? The wrongness? It'll kill us all in our sleep. He's a child, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. That is no child. Look at his eyes. Other villagers had begun to gather, drawn by the raised voices. Lantern light flickered across uneasy faces as they took in the scene. The blood, the torn clothes, the unnatural stillness of the boy in my arms. And yes, the faint, wrong aura that clung to him like frost. Then someone gasped. His scent, that's alpha. But wrong. Twisted. Demon spawn. Another voice trembled. It has to be. Kill it before it wakes. My grip tightened instinctively. He's a child. That is not a child, old Martha said hoarsely. Rowan, listen to me. Creatures like that bring calamity. If you take it into the village. He's dying, I said. And if he lives, someone snapped. What then? When it kills someone, will you take responsibility? I looked down at the boy. His face had gone slack again, lashes resting against pale cheeks, breath so faint I had to feel for it. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like someone who had been hurt too many times to believe rescue was possible. And beneath that, my Omega instincts, which had screamed danger moments ago, had quieted. Curiously. Protectively. Yes, I said quietly. Silence fell. If anything happens, I continued, meeting their frightened gazes, I will take responsibility. I won't let him hurt anyone. That, at least, I believed. Not because I knew what he was, but because right now, he was too weak to even hold his own head up. Old Martha closed her eyes briefly, as if fighting an internal battle. When she opened them again, there was resignation there. And fear. You always were too kind for your own good, she muttered. If this brings disaster, don't say we didn't warn you. No one moved to stop me, but no one offered help either. They stepped aside, leaving a clear path. Not welcoming, not forgiving, avoiding. My house sat at the far edge of the village, close to the forest line. Small, quiet, and usually lonely. Exactly how I preferred it. Tonight, it felt like a fragile refuge against a storm I didn't fully understand. I kicked the door shut behind me and hurried to the low bed near the hearth, setting the boy down as gently as possible. Up close, his injuries looked worse. Bruises mottled his skin, some fresh, others fading into sickly yellow. Cuts crisscrossed his arms, not all of them clean. Some looked suspiciously like claw marks. His left shoulder was badly swollen, likely dislocated. His scent was still wild, uncontrolled, but beneath the pain and fear, there was something else, something that made my Omega instincts want to soothe, to comfort. Who had done this? For what? Hang on, I murmured, already reaching for clean cloths and a bowl of warm water. His skin felt unnaturally cold beneath my fingers, as if warmth struggled to stay inside his body. Even after I wrapped him in blankets, the chill lingered. I worked slowly, cleaning dried blood, binding wounds, setting the dislocated shoulder with a soft apology when his body jerked reflexively. Through it all, he didn't wake, didn't cry, didn't even whimper. Children weren't supposed to be this quiet. When I finished, exhaustion hit me like a wave. I sat back on my heels, studying his face in the flickering firelight. Without the blood and grime, he looked younger. Fragile. Beautiful in a sharp, almost otherworldly way. What happened to you? I whispered. Of course, there was no answer. I rose to prepare thin porridge, something gentle, enough for someone who hadn't eaten properly. The simple routine steadied my racing heart. Rescue the injured, treat the sick, feed the hungry. Those were problems I understood. Demonic children with glowing eyes and wild alpha pheromones were new. A faint rustle behind me made me turn. He was awake. Barely. One eye cracked open, dark gaze unfocused but aware. For a long moment, we simply stared at each other across the small room. Then slowly, he pushed himself upright. Or tried to. Pain hit him immediately, breath hitching sharply as his arms trembled under the effort. "Don't move," I said quickly, crossing the room. "Your shoulder." Before I could reach him, his hand shot out. Not fast, not strong, but desperate. He grabbed my sleeve. I froze. His fingers were ice cold. His grip was surprisingly tight for someone so weak. His eyes searched my face, pupils dilated, expression somewhere between panic and disbelief. "Don't," he rasped. "Don't what?" His throat worked, as if forcing the words through pain. "Leave." Something inside my chest twisted painfully. "I'm not leaving," I said gently. "I was just getting food." He stared at me, as if trying to decide whether that was a lie. Liar. The accusation was faint, almost childlike. "I promise." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then slowly, his grip loosened. But he didn't let go entirely. His fingers still clutched the fabric, as if it were the only thing anchoring him to reality. "Hungry?" I asked softly. A tiny nod. I helped him sit properly, supporting his back with pillows. Up close, I could see how thin he really was, wrists narrow enough that my fingers nearly circled them completely. When I lifted the spoon to his lips, he flinched. Not from the heat, from the closeness. "It's okay," I murmured. "Just food." He hesitated, eyes flicking between the bowl and my face. Suspicion warring with hunger. Finally, he opened his mouth. Slowly, carefully, as if expecting pain. He ate like someone who had forgotten what it meant to be full. Small bites at first, cautious. Then faster, urgency creeping in despite visible discomfort. I slowed him gently, letting him rest between spoonfuls. Halfway through, his eyes grew heavy. "You can sleep," I said quietly. He shook his head weakly. "Stay." "I will." Only then did he allow his eyes to close. But even as sleep claimed him, his hand remained tangled in my sleeve, as if he didn't believe I would still be there when he woke. I watched him for a long time after the fire burned low. Outside, the wind howled against the walls, rattling the shutters. But inside the small house, there was only quiet, broken occasionally by his shallow breathing. A demon child, they had said. A calamity waiting to happen. Maybe they were right. Maybe tomorrow would bring consequences I couldn't predict. But tonight, he was just a hurt child who had asked me not to leave. Carefully, I adjusted the blanket around his shoulders. "You're safe here," I whispered, though he was already asleep. For a moment, I hesitated. Then gently, I rested my hand on his head. His hair was soft beneath my fingers, cool, but no longer freezing. His scent, still wild, still wrong, had begun to settle. Just slightly. "Whatever you are," I murmured, "you don't have to face it alone anymore." His grip tightened in his sleep. Not painfully, just enough to let me know he was still there. Still alive. Still holding on. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, for the first time in what must have been a very long while, the demon child slept without fear. And I had no idea that this small, fragile moment, this simple decision to bring him home, would one day change the fate of the entire world. When I woke the next morning, the first thing I noticed was that I couldn't move my arm. For one disoriented moment, I thought I had slept on it wrong. Then I looked down. The child was wrapped around it. Not loosely, not accidentally, clinging. At some point during the night, he had shifted closer, blankets tangled around both of us. One small hand was fisted tightly in the fabric of my sleeve, while his head rested against my shoulder. His breathing was shallow but steady, warm against my collarbone. His alpha scent had softened considerably, still unusual, still carrying that strange wrongness, but no longer screaming danger. He must have crawled there in his sleep, or perhaps not entirely in his sleep. The memory of his whispered, "Don't leave," tugged painfully at my chest. Carefully, I tested moving my fingers. His grip tightened instantly. Even asleep, he noticed. "I'm still here," I murmured softly. His lashes fluttered but didn't open. Slowly, cautiously, his hold loosened. Just enough that I could slide my arm free without waking him fully. Except he followed. As soon as the warmth disappeared, he shifted again, pressing closer. His brow furrowed faintly, as if troubled by the loss. I froze. Then, hesitantly, I rested my hand on his head. He stilled. The faint crease between his brows smoothed. Apparently, that was acceptable. So I stayed there for several minutes, half sitting against the wall, one hand awkwardly buried in his hair, waiting for him to wake properly. It was strangely peaceful. Outside, morning light filtered weakly through the shutters. The storm had finally passed. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear villagers beginning their day, doors opening, voices murmuring, the dull thud of wood being chopped. Normal life, as if nothing had changed, as if there wasn't a mysterious, possibly dangerous demon child sleeping in my bed. Eventually, his eyes opened, dark, unfocused at first, then snapping sharply into awareness the moment he realized where he was and who he was pressed against. He jerked back so suddenly that pain shot across his face, breath hissing through clenched teeth. "Careful," I said quickly. "Your shoulder." He ignored the warning, scrambling backward until his spine hit the wall. His gaze darted around the room like a trapped animal, searching for an exit. Only when he confirmed there was no immediate threat did his eyes return to me. Suspicious, guarded, and beneath it, something fragile. "You're still here," he said hoarsely. "Of course." He studied me as if trying to detect deception. Why? It was such a small question, but it carried the weight of someone who had never been given a reason before. "Because you're hurt," I said simply, "and because this is my home." His gaze flicked to the door, then the windows. Calculating. "You didn't tell them." "Tell who?" "The others." His lips curled faintly. "The ones outside." So he had heard them last night. "I didn't tell them anything they don't already suspect," I admitted. "But I didn't hand you over either." A long pause. "Stupid." "Probably." Something like confusion crossed his face. Then his stomach growled loudly. We both looked down at it. A faint flush crept across his pale cheeks, the first hint of normal childhood embarrassment I had seen from him. "Hungry?" I asked gently. He hesitated, pride warring visibly with need. "Maybe." I smiled. "That sounds like a yes." He watched me warily as I prepared food, eyes tracking every movement as if memorizing escape routes. Even sitting upright seemed to exhaust him, shoulders trembling slightly from the effort. When I approached with the bowl, he stiffened. "I won't poison you," I said dryly. "You could. I could also have left you in the snow." That shut him up. Reluctantly, he allowed me to help him hold the bowl, fingers brushing mine for a split second before jerking away as if burned. Cold. Not normal cold. Something deeper, almost biting. He ate more slowly this time, though his eyes never left my face for long. Suspicion lingered in every movement, but hunger gradually overpowered caution. Halfway through, he paused. "Why are you watching me?" "To make sure you don't choke." "I'm not a baby." "I didn't say you were." "A bit." "I won't choke." "Good." He frowned, as if uncertain how to respond to such an unremarkable statement. When he finished, he didn't hand the bowl back. Instead, he held it awkwardly in his lap, gaze lowered, fingers tracing the rim. "What?" I asked. A long pause. Then, almost inaudibly, "Thank you." The words sounded unfamiliar, as if he had rarely used them before. "You're welcome." He looked up sharply, searching my expression again. No mockery, no hidden demand, just simple acceptance. Something in his shoulders loosened a fraction. "What's your name?" I asked after a while. He went completely still. The fragile calm shattered instantly. Don't have one. My heart squeezed painfully. Everyone has a name. Not me. The flat certainty in his tone left no room for argument. I studied him for a moment. Dark hair, dark eyes, that strange faint aura of wrongness and power. Dangerous, lonely, beautiful in a sharp, unearthly way. Would you like one? I asked gently. Suspicion flared again. Why? So I know what to call you. Silence stretched. Then, almost inaudibly, anything. I thought for a moment. His presence felt like shadow and embers, like something ancient and restless finally stilled. Kale, I said softly. It means keeper of the shadows. He repeated it slowly, as if tasting the syllables. Kale. Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, but not emptiness either. Mine, he asked uncertainly. Yes, if you want it. Another long pause. Then, very quietly, I want it. All right, I said, smiling. Then Kale it is. He lowered his gaze again, fingers tightening around the blanket. Rowan, I added. His head snapped up. What? My name. Rowan. He stared at me as if the concept were foreign. You're telling me that? That's usually how introductions work. Why? I huffed a small laugh. Because we're going to be living in the same house, and it would be awkward if you kept calling me hey you. Rowan. He repeated slowly, hearing my name in that small, uncertain voice. It did something strange to my chest. The rest of the morning passed quietly. He watched everything. How I moved around the kitchen, how I tended the fire, how I sorted herbs. At first, I assumed it was simple curiosity. Then I realized something unsettling. He wasn't just watching. He was memorizing. Every gesture, every habit, every sound. Like survival depended on it. When I finally stepped outside to fetch water, I hesitated at the door. You'll be all right for a few minutes? I asked. His expression went blank. You're leaving? Just to the well. I'll be right back. His hands clenched in the blankets. Don't. My heart twisted again. I have to. But I promise I'll come back. Silence. Then, grudgingly. Fast. I'll be very fast. I returned less than 5 minutes later. The door was open. Panic surged through me until I saw him, standing just outside the threshold, swaying slightly from weakness, eyes fixed on the path as if prepared to run after me. Relief flooded his face the moment he saw me. You took too long. It was 5 minutes. Too long. He collapsed back inside as soon as I set the bucket down, clearly having pushed himself far beyond his limits. You shouldn't be standing yet, I scolded gently, helping him back to bed. Had to make sure, he muttered. Make sure of what? That you came back. Something inside me cracked open completely. I told you I would. People lie. I won't. He studied me for a long moment. If you do, he said quietly, I'll find you. There was no childish petulance in the statement. No exaggeration. Just calm certainty. For reasons I couldn't explain, a chill ran down my spine. That night, he fell asleep faster. Closer. Curled toward me like a small animal seeking warmth. And when I shifted slightly, his hand found my sleeve again without waking. Fingers hooking into the fabric as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I didn't move away. Days passed. His injuries began to heal, though the unnatural chill around him never fully disappeared. Sometimes I would catch frost forming faintly on the rim of a water cup he had touched. Other times, shadows in the room seemed to deepen when he was upset. I pretended not to notice. If he wanted to tell me what he was, he would. If not, forcing him wouldn't help. He learned quickly. Too quickly. Within a week, he could speak in full sentences, though he still preferred silence. He followed me everywhere I allowed, watching, absorbing, occasionally asking blunt, unsettling questions. Why do people smile when they're unhappy? Why do they pretend not to be afraid? Why did they want to kill me? That last one nearly broke me. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, He sat beside me on the floor, carefully sorting dried herbs under my supervision. His movements were precise, delicate, far too controlled for a child. "Rowan," he said suddenly. "Yes." A pause. "Are you afraid of me?" The question was quiet, vulnerable. I set down the herbs and looked at him properly. "No." He searched my face, clearly expecting to find a lie. "Why not?" "Because you haven't given me a reason to be." Silence stretched. Then, almost inaudibly, "I could. I know." His hands stilled. "And you'd still stay?" "Yes." For a long time, he didn't speak. Then, very carefully, as if testing something fragile, he leaned sideways until his shoulder brushed mine. Not clinging, not demanding, just touching. I didn't pull away. After several seconds, I felt the faint pressure increase, his head resting lightly against my arm. Warm breath ghosted against my sleeve. "Good," he whispered. Outside, the world remained wary. Inside, something fragile and extraordinary was taking root. Trust, slow and stubborn, growing in the quiet space between fear and kindness. I didn't know what Kale truly was. I didn't know why he had been abandoned, hunted, or left to die in the snow. But one thing had become painfully clear. He wasn't just afraid of the world. He was afraid of losing the one place where he finally felt safe. And without realizing it, I had already become that place. Winter did not leave quietly that year. Even as the snow began to melt, the air carried a sharpness that lingered in the bones, as if the mountains themselves were reluctant to release their grip on the land. The forest dripped steadily during the day, only to freeze again at night, turning every branch into glass. Kale healed faster than any child should. Within 2 weeks, he could walk without swaying. Within 3, the bruises had faded, the cuts reduced to faint silver lines across pale skin. His dislocated shoulder regained full movement with unsettling ease, as if his body simply refused to remain broken. I told myself it was a blessing. I tried not to wonder what it meant. He had also grown quieter, not withdrawn. He still followed me everywhere, still hovered at my side while I worked, still insisted on sitting close enough that our sleeves brushed. But there was a new tension coiled beneath the surface. Alertness, like a predator sensing something beyond human perception. His alpha scent had matured, still unusual, still carrying that strange undercurrent of wrongness, but more controlled, more dangerous. Sometimes I would catch him staring toward the forest, eyes narrowed, head tilted slightly, as if listening to a sound I couldn't hear. "What is it?" I asked once. "Nothing." The answer came too quickly. The villagers avoided my house more than ever. Where once I had received occasional visitors for herbs or simple company, now people left offerings at the gate and departed without knocking. Children who used to wave from the road were pulled away by anxious parents. Rumors had spread. I didn't know exactly what they said, but I could guess. Strange child, unnatural aura, calamity waiting to happen. Kale noticed too. One afternoon, he stood by the window, watching a pair of women hurry past with their heads down. "They're afraid," he said flatly. I didn't deny it. "Yes." Silence. "Good." I looked up sharply. He wasn't smiling. There was no satisfaction in his expression, only something cold. "They won't try to take me if they're afraid," he added. My chest tightened. "No one is taking you anywhere." For a moment, his gaze softened. "Promise." "I promise." That night, the unease that had been building finally took shape. I woke to the sound of voices outside, not the casual murmurs of neighbors passing by, but low, urgent, angry. Kale was already awake. He sat upright beside the bed, completely still, eyes fixed on the door. In the faint moonlight, his pupils looked enormous, swallowing the irises entirely. "Stay behind me," he said. The calm authority in his voice sent a chill through me. "Kale, stay." Before I could argue, a heavy knock rattled the door. "Rowan Hart," someone shouted. "Open up." Recognition flickered through my mind. Elder Magnus, the leader of the village council. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a social visit. I rose slowly, placing a hand on Kale's shoulder as I passed. It's all right. Let me talk to them. His fingers caught my sleeve instantly. Don't go. I'll be right here. No. His grip tightened, nails digging into the fabric. They want me. Another knock, louder this time. Open the door, Rowan. We know it's in there. My pulse spiked. Stay in the back room, I said quietly. Kale shook his head. If they try to hurt you. His eyes darkened, something ancient and furious flickering beneath the surface. I won't stop. Please, I said softly. Trust me. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then reluctantly, his fingers loosened. But he didn't retreat far, just enough to be out of immediate sight, his gaze still locked on me like a tether. I opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of damp earth and smoke. 5 men stood outside, armed not with farming tools, but with actual weapons. Spears, swords, a hunting crossbow. Elder Magnus stepped forward, face grim. Rowan, he said, we need to talk. My eyes flicked to the weapons. At this hour, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't serious. Behind him, one of the men spat on the ground. We've tolerated this long enough. That thing is bringing misfortune. Elder Magnus raised a hand, though he didn't contradict the sentiment. Strange things have been happening, he said carefully. Livestock found frozen solid. Tracks in the forest that don't belong to any animal. His gaze sharpened. Children have been having nightmares. My stomach twisted. You think that's his fault? We think he isn't human. Silence stretched between us. Even if he isn't, I said finally, he hasn't hurt anyone. Yet, someone snapped. We can't wait for a tragedy. Another added, if he grows stronger. He's a child. Monsters start small, too. A cold prickle crawled up my spine. Not from their words, from the sudden drop in temperature behind me. The air inside the house had grown noticeably colder. Elder Magnus noticed. His expression tightened. He's listening, isn't he? I didn't answer. Rowan, he said quietly, almost pleading now. Step aside. Let us take him. If he truly means no harm, traveling witches passing through next month will confirm it. And if they don't, his tone implied the rest, we'll deal with it. My hands curled into fists. No. Murmurs of anger rippled through the group. Don't be foolish. You're risking everyone. We can't allow this. A soft sound came from behind me. Bare feet on wood. Slow. Deliberate. Every man outside went rigid. Kale stepped into view. He wasn't trembling. Wasn't hiding. He walked forward until he stood just behind my shoulder, one small hand gripping the back of my sleeve. Possessive. Claiming. The reaction was immediate. Several men recoiled. One raised his weapon instinctively. Don't, I snapped. But Kale wasn't looking at them. His gaze was fixed on Elder Magnus, completely expressionless. You want me to go with you? He said. His voice was soft. Too soft. Elder Magnus swallowed. Yes. Silence. If I refuse. The temperature dropped further. Frost began to creep along the door frame. You're not leaving, I said firmly. Kale's fingers tightened in my sleeve. They're afraid. I know. If they keep being afraid. Something in his voice changed, deepened. They'll keep trying to take me. I turned toward him fully. Kale. His eyes met mine. And for a split second, I saw the child he was trying so hard not to be. I don't want to hurt them, he whispered. But I don't want to leave you. My throat closed. You won't. I won't let them take you. Behind us, someone shouted. Do something before it attacks. Another man raised his spear. Everything happened at once. Kale moved. Not fast in the way a child runs. Fast in the way lightning strikes. One moment he was behind me. The next he stood between me and the weapon, eyes blazing with deep, unnatural crimson. The spear stopped midair. Not because the man halted, because it couldn't move. A thin layer of black frost crawled up the shaft, threading with horrifying speed until the wood cracked and splintered apart, shattering into glittering shards that fell uselessly to the ground. The man screamed, stumbling backward. The air howled. Wind slammed outward from Kale in a violent burst, extinguishing lanterns and sending snow and debris spiraling into the darkness. Shadows pooled around his feet like liquid night. His hair lifted as if caught in an unseen current, eyes glowing brighter with each passing second. Not a child, not human, something ancient wearing a child's shape. Leave, he said. The word vibrated through the air like distant thunder. No one moved. Frost spread across the ground, creeping toward the men's boots, crackling ominously. I said leave. Elder Magnus grabbed the nearest man's arm. Go, he hissed. Now. Panic broke the paralysis. They fled, stumbling, tripping, abandoning weapons in their haste to escape the unnatural terror radiating from the small figure in the doorway. Within seconds, the path was empty, silent. But Kale didn't relax. The shadows still writhed around him, dark energy pulsing erratically, as if he were barely containing something vast and furious. Kale, I said carefully. No response. Kale. His head turned slowly. Those glowing eyes locked onto me. For one terrifying heartbeat, I wasn't sure he recognized me at all. Something inside him had surfaced, something far older and far less forgiving than a frightened child. Rowan, he said. The voice sounded wrong, layered, echoing faintly, as if another presence spoke beneath it. Yes, I said, forcing calm into my tone. I'm here. He stared at me, confusion flickering across his face. Then the shadows surged violently. His body swayed, and suddenly he collapsed forward. I caught him just before he hit the ground. The cold that poured off him was intense, enough to make my hands ache. But I held on, pulling him close. Kale. No answer. His eyes had closed, lashes stark against his pale cheeks. Breath shallow and uneven. Unconscious. Inside, I carried him back to the bed, wrapping blankets tightly around his small frame. Frost still clung to his hair, melting slowly in the warmth of the room. What had that been? Power. Raw, overwhelming power, unleashed by fear, or by the threat of losing me. After several minutes, he stirred. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused. Rowan, I'm here. Relief flooded his face instantly, so intense it hurt to see. Did I hurt you? No. Anyone else? They left. He went very still. I didn't mean to. I know. His fingers twisted in the blanket. You're afraid now. It wasn't a question. I reached out and brushed damp hair from his forehead. No. His eyes widened slightly. But you saw. I saw a child who protected himself. I could have killed them. But you didn't. His lips trembled faintly. I wanted to. The honesty was raw, frightening. I cupped his cheek gently, forcing him to meet my gaze. Kale, listen to me. He froze. You are not alone. Whatever you are, whatever power you have, we'll figure it out together. His eyes filled with something bright and fragile. You're not going to send me away? Never. He stared at me for a long time. Then, very slowly, he leaned forward until his forehead pressed against my shoulder. Small hands clutched the fabric of my robe like a lifeline. I was scared, he admitted in a tiny voice. I know. Not of them. His grip tightened. Of losing you. My arms wrapped around him before I could think. He was cold, shaking, not from power this time, but from something far more human. Fear. You won't lose me. I murmured into his hair. A long pause. Then, almost too quiet to hear. Promise? I promise. Outside, the night had fallen silent again. But nothing would ever be the same. The village had seen what Kale truly was. Fear would grow. Suspicion would harden into hostility. And sooner or later, someone stronger than frightened villagers would come looking for the monster child who wielded darkness like a weapon. But as he clung to me, trembling and exhausted, there was only one thing that mattered. He wasn't a calamity. He wasn't a demon. He was a terrified child who had lashed out to protect the only person who had ever shown him kindness. And I would not abandon him, no matter what came next. Spring arrived too quickly. Snow vanished in muddy patches, streams swelled with meltwater, and the first fragile green shoots pushed through the earth, as if nothing had happened. Birds returned. Farmers resumed their routines. Smoke rose peacefully from chimneys each evening. But peace did not return to our house. The village kept its distance. No one came to the door anymore, not even to leave offerings. When I went to the market, conversations died the moment I approached. People avoided eye contact. Mothers pulled children behind them like shields. They stared openly at the frost that still lingered on the edges of my sleeves, no matter how warm the day. Word had spread. Not rumor anymore. Truth. Cale noticed everything. Of course he did. He always walked beside me now, never wandering even a step ahead like before. His hand hovered near my sleeve, as if ready to grab it at any moment, though he tried not to make the gesture obvious. One afternoon, as we walked back from the well, he finally spoke. "Are you angry at me?" The question came out quietly, but not cautiously, like he'd been holding it in for days. I stopped. Angry? Why would I be angry? He didn't look at me. They're scared because of what I did. His fingers twisted together, knuckles pale. You can't talk to people like before. They look at you like you're dangerous too. My chest tightened. That's not your fault. But it happened because of me. Cale. He finally glanced up, eyes uncertain, searching. If I hadn't been here, he continued, voice unsteady, you wouldn't be alone now. I crouched in front of him before he could look away again. You think I'd rather you disappear so people would like me more? He froze. Wouldn't you? No. The answer came instantly. Not even a little. His eyes widened, surprise flickering across his face. But humans need other humans, he said slowly, like repeating something he'd learned. You can't just live with a monster. You're not a monster. His breath caught. You protected us. They were trying to hurt you. Silence stretched. A breeze lifted strands of his dark hair across his face. For once, he didn't brush them away. I don't understand humans, he admitted. If something is dangerous, shouldn't you get rid of it? That's one way to think about it. Isn't it the correct way? I studied him carefully. No, I said softly. Not always. He frowned. What? Because sometimes, I said, reaching out to smooth his hair back, something dangerous is also something precious. His breath caught slightly at the touch. Precious. Yes. To me. He stared at me like I'd just said something impossible. Even though I could hurt you? You haven't. But I might. So might anyone. He blinked, clearly not expecting that. Humans hurt each other all the time. I continued. Accidentally. On purpose. Out of fear. Out of anger. Being dangerous doesn't make you unworthy of care. His eyes grew suspiciously bright. You're strange. I laughed softly. I've been told that. I don't dislike it. For a moment, the heaviness lifted. He hesitated, then slowly, very slowly, slipped his hand into mine. Not clinging. Not desperate. Just holding. Warmth spread through my chest. If they come again, he said after a while, I'll try not to scare them. I squeezed his fingers gently. You don't have to do that. But I don't want you to suffer because of me. I'm not suffering. You're lonely. I didn't answer immediately, because he wasn't entirely wrong. I was lonely before you came, I admitted at last. His head snapped up. But you lived here your whole life. And most of that time, I lived alone. He processed that slowly. Then we were both alone. Yes. Another pause. Are you still lonely now? I smiled. No. His shoulders relaxed just a little. Good. That night, for the first time since the incident, Cale fell asleep without waking repeatedly. He slept deeply, curled on his side facing me, one hand resting loosely against my sleeve, as if needing only minimal reassurance that I was still there. I stayed awake longer than usual, listening to his breathing. Something felt wrong. Not immediate danger, not obvious threat, just the sense of pressure building somewhere far away. The sky split open at dawn. A thunderous boom shook the entire village, rattling windows and sending birds exploding into flight. I bolted upright. Kale did too, eyes wide and instantly alert. What was that? Before I could answer, a second explosion echoed. Not sound alone, but force. Like the air itself had been struck. Outside, people screamed. We ran to the door together and stopped dead. High above the village, streaks of light tore across the sky. Brilliant, unnatural arcs of gold and white that left burning trails in their wake. Witches. Powerful ones. Kale's grip on my sleeve tightened painfully. They found me. The words came out hollow. Cold. Resigned. A third streak descended, slower this time, until it hovered above the village square like a miniature sun. Figures stepped out of the light, robes flowing, staves gleaming, expressions carved from stone. Even from this distance, I could feel the pressure of their presence. Heavy, suffocating, impossible to ignore. Not villagers, not travelers, hunters. Kale began to tremble, not with fear alone, with fury. They're going to take me, he whispered. No, I said immediately, though my heart was pounding. They always do. Not this time. He turned to me, eyes shining with something close to panic. You don't understand. People like them don't ask. They decide. Then we'll talk to them. Talk. He laughed, sharp and brittle. You can't negotiate with people who came prepared to kill. My stomach dropped. Kill. If they think I'm a threat, his voice cracked. They won't risk letting me live. His nails dug into my sleeve. You should stay inside. What? No. If you're not with me, they might ignore you. I'm not abandoning you. His composure shattered. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. He burst out, louder than I'd ever heard him speak. The raw desperation in his voice made my chest ache. Kale. I grabbed his shoulders firmly. We faced this together. He stared at me, breathing hard. Why? He demanded hoarsely. Why are you still choosing me? Because you're a child. Because you're alone. Because you need someone. Because I can't bear the thought of you facing this by yourself. But what came out was simpler. Because you matter to me. His breath hitched violently. Tears gathered in his eyes, though he fought them fiercely. I don't want to leave you, he whispered. You won't. If they force me, then I'll come get you. You don't even know where they'll take me. Then I'll find out. He stared at me like he couldn't decide whether to believe me or break down completely. You can't promise that, he said weakly. I just did. A shockwave rolled through the village, closer this time. A voice rang out, amplified by power. Entity of demonic origin. Reveal yourself. The words vibrated in the air like a command from the heavens. Kale flinched as if struck. They're calling me, he said numbly. My grip tightened on his shoulders. You don't have to go. If I don't, they'll start destroying things until I do. Another explosion punctuated his words, a storage shed at the edge of the village, collapsing in a plume of dust. Screams followed. His face crumpled. I can't let them hurt everyone. He looked at me with heartbreaking intensity. Stay here, he said softly. No, please. If you come, they might hurt you to control me. I don't care. I care. Silence fell between us, thick and trembling. Then he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. Tightly, desperately, like someone clinging to the last solid thing in a collapsing world. I was happy here, he murmured into my shoulder. For the first time, my arms came up around him automatically. You can be happy again. Not without you. Another boom shook the ground. Dust fell from the roof beams. Tom was running out. He pulled back just enough to look at me. His eyes were red, not glowing with power, red with tears. If they take me, he said, voice shaking, don't forget me. My heart felt like it stopped. Don't say that. I need to know you won't. I won't. He hesitated. Then, unexpectedly, He leaned forward and pressed his forehead against mine. A child's gesture. Trusting. Intimate. Fragile. "I'll come back," he whispered, lips trembling. "I promise." Then he turned and walked toward the door. Each step slow. Heavy. Final. I grabbed his wrist. "You're not going alone." He didn't turn around. "If you come, I might not be able to control myself." His voice cracked. "Thank you for choosing me." Then he stepped outside into the light. Into the waiting hunters. Into the moment that would change everything. 5 years passed. Not gently, not quietly. 5 years carved their mark into everything. The village, the land, and most of all, the person I had once been. The house at the edge of the forest still stood, though the roof had been repaired twice and the fence replaced entirely. Ivy had begun creeping along the outer walls, softening the weathered wood. The herb garden had expanded, filling most of the yard in careful rows of green and silver. On the surface, life looked peaceful, predictable, ordinary, but nothing inside me had settled. People had started speaking to me again, carefully at first, as if approaching a wounded animal that might bolt or bite. Over time, necessity overcame discomfort. Illness didn't care about superstition, and I remained the only person in the region with reliable medicinal knowledge. They thanked me. They paid fairly, but they never stayed long. And no one ever mentioned the day the sky tore open. At night, when the village fell silent, I sometimes walked to the square and stood at the place where the witch's formation had burned into the earth. The marks were gone now. Rain and wind had erased them years ago, but I remembered exactly where it had been. I always did. That evening, the air felt heavy. Not storm-heavy, something else. The kind of pressure that makes animals restless and birds fall silent long before danger becomes visible. I paused while gathering herbs, hand hovering over a cluster of moonleaf, and looked toward the mountains. "You feel it too, don't you?" The wind answered with a low, uneasy rustle. It had started a month ago. Small disturbances at first. Unseasonal frost appearing overnight on high ground. Strange shadows moving in places where light should have reached. Travelers reporting sightings of something vast passing through remote valleys, leaving silence in its wake. No one agreed on details, only on one thing. Something powerful had entered the region. I told myself it didn't mean anything. Powerful beings moved through the world all the time. Not everything had to do with him. Not everything. A sharp crack split the air. I straightened instantly. The sound hadn't come from nearby trees or falling branches. It had come from above. Clouds churned unnaturally, twisting into a dark spiral that seemed to pull light inward rather than reflect it. Winds surged outward in violent bursts, bending treetops and sending leaves spiraling into the sky. Birds exploded from the forest canopy in a chaotic wave. My pulse spiked. Not fear. Recognition. No, I whispered. Not hope. Hope had been dangerous for years. Hope had teeth. The spiral tightened. Darkness condensed at its center, swallowing sunlight until a hole of pure shadow hung in the sky like an open wound. Villagers began shouting in the distance. Doors slammed. Children cried. Something moved inside the darkness. Not falling, not flying. Descending with deliberate, terrifying control. When it emerged fully, the world seemed to hold its breath. A figure clothed in black. Long robes that flowed like liquid night, embroidered with patterns so dark they swallowed light. Hair equally black streamed behind him in the violent wind, catching glints of silver like starlight trapped in shadow. He didn't land immediately. He hovered several meters above the ground, surveying the land below with a stillness that radiated absolute authority. Predatory, ancient, unreachable. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. There was something familiar about the shape of his face, the line of his jaw, the way his gaze moved across the landscape, as if cataloging every threat within miles. But it couldn't be. His eyes found me across the entire clearing. as if I were the only living thing in the world. The impact was physical, a sudden tightening in my chest, breath catching painfully, as recognition slammed into me with brutal force. Not because he looked the same, he didn't. The child I remembered was gone. In his place stood something breathtaking and terrifying. Tall, broad-shouldered, radiating power so dense the air around him shimmered. But the eyes, those eyes were unchanged. Dark, intense, focused on me with an emotion so raw it stripped away the years in a single heartbeat. He dropped from the sky, not falling, descending like a blade lowered toward its target. The ground cracked beneath his feet when he landed, fissures spreading outward in jagged lines before sealing again, as if the earth itself didn't dare remain broken in his presence. Wind died instantly. Silence crashed down. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there staring. My throat felt dry. Kale. The name slipped out before I could stop it. His expression shattered. Not visibly, not in a way most people would notice. But I saw it. The subtle tremor in his shoulders, the tightening of his jaw, the way his hands curled slowly into fists, as if holding himself together by force alone. "You remember me," he said. His voice was deep now, low, carrying a resonance that vibrated through the air like distant thunder. But beneath it, unmistakable, was the echo of the boy who had once clung to my sleeve. "Of course I remember you," I said, heart racing. How could I ever forget? A sound escaped him. Not quite a laugh, not quite a breath, sharp and uneven. He took one step forward. I realized then how much taller he had become. He towered over me now, presence overwhelming, shadow falling across the ground like something alive. "I thought about this moment every day," he said quietly. "What I would say when I saw you again. What you would say." "Yes." His gaze searched my face with almost painful intensity. I didn't expect to forget all of it. Something in my chest tightened. "You don't have to say anything," I said gently. "You came back. That's enough." His eyes darkened instantly. "No," he said. "It isn't." Before I could react, he closed the distance completely. One hand came up, large, calloused, trembling slightly, and stopped just short of my face, as if he wasn't sure he was allowed to touch me. The hesitation hurt more than any wound. "May I?" he asked. The question was so unexpected I forgot to breathe. "You don't need permission," I said softly. His restraint snapped. His hand slid against my cheek, warm despite the cold aura surrounding him, thumb brushing along my jaw as if verifying I was real. The touch was careful, reverent, but beneath it, I could feel the strength coiled in his fingers. Enough to crush bone if he chose. He didn't. "You're exactly the same," he murmured, voice rough. "Not a day older. Not a single line changed." "Which is longevity," I said. I had almost forgotten how strange it must seem. "And you?" I exhaled shakily. "You grew up." Something like pain flashed across his face. I had to. His thumb paused near the corner of my mouth. "You weren't there." Guilt twisted through me. "I tried to find you," I said. "I just didn't know where to look." "I know you did." His lips curved faintly, not a smile, but something softer. "They told me, the coven. They thought it was amusing. The civilian caretaker who asked too many questions, traveled too far, refused to accept polite refusals." Heat rushed to my face. "So you knew all along?" "Yes." "And you didn't come sooner?" The air darkened, not visibly, but the temperature dropped, shadows lengthening unnaturally at the edges of the clearing. "I couldn't," he said quietly. "Not until I was strong enough that no one could stop me from leaving again." A chill ran down my spine. Strong enough to do what? His eyes locked onto mine. "To return to you," he said simply. My breath caught. Years of distance, uncertainty, grief, all of it compressed into the space between us. Fragile and overwhelming. "You really came back?" I whispered. His expression softened in a way that transformed him completely, stripping away the terrifying aura and revealing something achingly familiar beneath. "I told you I would," he said. And then, almost like a confession torn free after years of restraint, "I never stopped wanting to." Before I could process that, he pulled me into an embrace. Not tentative, not polite, desperate. His arms wrapped around me with crushing force, lifting me slightly off the ground, as if he needed absolute certainty that I was there. Solid, alive, not another dream that would dissolve when he woke. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, not from pain, from the sheer intensity of it. His face buried against my shoulder, breath hot and uneven against my neck. "Do you know," he said hoarsely, "how many times I imagined this?" My hands hovered uncertainly before settling against his back. "I imagined it too." His grip tightened further. "Then don't disappear," he murmured. "Not again." "I didn't disappear. You weren't there. I couldn't be." A shudder ran through him. "I know." When he finally pulled back, his eyes were bright, not with tears, but with something far more dangerous. Possession, relief, hunger for closeness that had gone unfed for far too long. "You're coming with me," he said. The words weren't a command, not quite, but they weren't really a question either. "Coming where?" "Anywhere that isn't here." I blinked. "You just got back." "Yes." "And now you're leaving again?" "Not alone this time." My heart stumbled. "Kale." He stepped closer, gaze unwavering. "I spent 5 years in a place where everything was cold, controlled, and watched," he said quietly. "The only thing that kept me from losing myself was the thought that you were still somewhere in the world." His voice dropped lower. "If I leave you behind now, I don't trust myself to survive it again." The raw honesty hit like a physical blow. "You don't have to survive alone anymore," I said softly. Something in his expression broke open completely. Relief, joy, and a depth of devotion so intense it made my pulse race. "Then come with me," he said, almost pleading. "Now." Despite the power radiating from him, "Stay with me. Let me protect you." This time, we didn't leave immediately. There were things to pack, a house to close up, a life to put on hold. Kale insisted on helping, though his version of helping was mostly standing in corners and watching me with an intensity that made my hands tremble. "You're staring," I said for the third time. "I'm allowed." "You weren't this intense as a child." "I wasn't this tall as a child." I laughed despite myself. "Fair point." He moved closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, a stark contrast to the cold that had clung to him when we first met. His control had grown immensely. "I have something to tell you," he said. I turned to face him fully. "What is it?" His jaw tightened. Then, slowly, as if afraid of my reaction, "The Coven. They didn't just want to contain me. They wanted to use me. My power. My bloodline." My stomach dropped. "Use you how?" "As a weapon." His voice was flat. "There's a war coming. A conflict between covens that's been brewing for centuries. They wanted me on their side. But I refused." "Refused?" He met my eyes. "I told them I wouldn't fight for anyone who took me from you." The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading through my chest. "Kale, I don't care about their war." His voice hardened. "I care about you. Only you. Everything I did, every battle I fought, every power I claimed. It was all so I could come back. So no one could ever take me from you again." His hand found mine. Warm. Calloused. Certain. "I'm not a child anymore, Rowan. I know what I want. And what I want." He stepped closer, close enough that our chests nearly touched. "Is you. Not as a caretaker. Not as a protector. As my equal. My partner. My mate." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Kale, you don't have to answer now." His voice softened, almost vulnerable. "I've waited 5 years. I can wait longer. But I needed you to know." I reached up and touched his face. The sharp jaw, the smooth skin, the faint lines of exhaustion that still lingered. He leaned into my touch like a starving man. You came back, I whispered. You kept your promise. I will always keep my promises to you. Then promise me this. I pulled him closer. Promise you won't leave again. His eyes widened. Then his arms wrapped around me, crushing me to his chest. Never, he breathed against my hair. I'm never leaving you again. We stayed like that until the sun set, wrapped in each other, the weight of 5 years finally lifting. The cottage at the edge of the village was no longer our home. Kale had built us a new one, deep in the forest, hidden from prying eyes, surrounded by ancient trees and the quiet whispers of the wild. It wasn't large, but it was ours. You're brooding again, he said, appearing in the doorway with 2 mugs of tea. I'm reflecting. Same thing. I took the tea and smiled. You've been listening to me for too long. I've been loving you for too long, he corrected, settling beside me on the porch. And I'm not stopping now. Outside, the forest stretched endlessly, green and gold in the fading light. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The world was peaceful. I leaned against his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around me, pulling me close. Happy, he asked. Happy, I said. Happier than I ever thought I could be. Good. He kissed my temple. Because this is just the beginning. The stars emerged, one by one, and the forest grew quiet. I had found a demon child in the snow, raised him, lost him, and been found by him again. He had crossed continents, defied covens, and claimed his own destiny. And in the end, we had found each other. This was our story. Imperfect, complicated, beautiful. And it was nowhere near over. I set down my tea and let the silence settle between us. Not the uneasy quiet of strangers sharing space, but the deep, comfortable stillness of 2 people who had learned to breathe in the same rhythm. Kale's thumb traced slow circles against my shoulder, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the tree-line. I recognized that look. He was listening to something I couldn't hear. What is it? I asked softly. His jaw tightened. They're still looking for me. I didn't need to ask who. The coven that had taken him, the one that had tried to mold him into a weapon, had not simply let him walk away. He had escaped, not been released. There would be consequences. How long until they find us here? I kept my voice calm, though my pulse had quickened. Weeks, maybe less. His hand stilled. I've laid wards, layers of them. Illusions, misdirections, traps that would shred anyone who doesn't know the path. But nothing is unbreakable. Not against their resources. I turned to look at him properly. In the soft glow of the lantern hanging beside the door, his features were sharp and beautiful. Dark hair falling across his brow, eyes reflecting the firelight like pools of molten shadow. 5 years had carved him into something formidable. But I had watched him sleep curled against my side, had seen him weep from nightmares he refused to describe. I knew the boy beneath the monster. Then we prepare, I said. His gaze snapped to mine. You're not afraid. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I told you once that I would take responsibility. I meant it. Something flickered across his face. Gratitude, wonder, a fierce tenderness that made my chest ache. You're extraordinary, he murmured. Do you know that? I'm practical. There's a difference. He laughed softly, the sound warming the cool evening air. No, there really isn't. I reached up and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. He leaned into the touch, eyes fluttering half-closed, and for a moment he looked almost like the child I had carried through the snow. Almost. Tell me about the coven, I said. Everything you didn't tell me before. He was silent for a long moment. Then he exhaled, slow and heavy, and began. They called themselves the Obsidian Circle. Not a coven in the traditional sense. No seasonal gatherings, no shared rituals, no sense of community. They were an order of power seekers who believed that magic existed to be dominated, controlled, and wielded. Weakness was a sin. Mercy was foolishness. And anything that could not be used was to be destroyed. Kale had been the rarest prize they had ever acquired. a demon-touched alpha child with natural affinity for shadow and frost, untrained but already terrifying. They had not nurtured him. They had broken him. The first year, he said quietly, they kept me in a cage woven from iron and witchbane. Every morning, they would reach through the bars and test my power, push me until I lashed out, then punish me for losing control. They wanted me strong, but they wanted me obedient more. My hands had curled into fists in my lap. They hurt you. They trained me. His voice was flat, but his fingers trembled against my shoulder. There's a difference, they said. Pain is teaching. Suffering is growth. That's not teaching. That's torture. He looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw the full weight of what he had endured. Not the surface wounds that had healed, but the deeper fractures that time could not simply mend. I survived because I thought of you, he admitted. At night, when the cage grew cold and the shadows whispered things I didn't want to hear, I would close my eyes and remember your house. The smell of herbs drying by the hearth. The sound of your voice when you said my name for the first time. Kale. His breath caught. Like that. I reached for his hand, interlacing our fingers. His palm was warm against mine, calloused from years of combat and training. A warrior's hand, but it held mine with the same desperate gentleness as when he had been small enough to fit against my chest. How did you escape? I asked. A dark smile curved his lips, not cruel, but edged with something sharp. I stopped pretending to be weak. He told me about the final trial the Circle had forced upon him. A combat ritual against 3 of their most lethal enforcers, designed to push him beyond his limits or kill him in the attempt. They had expected desperation. They had expected fear. What they had not expected was for him to stop holding back. I had hidden the full extent of my power for years, he said. Let them believe they had me measured, contained, controlled. But the night before the ritual, something broke inside me. Not my mind, my restraint. I realized that if I died in that circle, I would never see you again. And that was unacceptable. The fight had lasted less than a minute. He had not killed the enforcers. He had wanted to, had felt the hunger rise like a living thing in his chest, but he had chosen differently. He had crippled them, disabled them, and walked past their fallen bodies without looking back. The coven leader tried to stop me at the gate, he said softly. She was ancient, powerful, had lived through centuries of war and betrayal. She looked at me and said, if you leave now, you will never be safe. We will hunt you to the ends of the world. What did you say? Kale's eyes met mine. I said, then let them come. The weeks that followed were not peaceful, but they were good. We fell into a rhythm. Morning walks through the forest while Kale checked his wards. Afternoons spent tending the garden or practicing magic under the dappled sunlight. Evenings by the fire with books and quiet conversation. He taught me things I had never known about the world beyond the village. The politics of covens, the history of demon-touched bloodlines, the secret languages written in the patterns of frost on winter windows. In return, I taught him how to cook properly. His attempts had been disastrous. How to identify edible mushrooms without magic, and how to laugh at his own mistakes. The last one took the longest. He had been trained to treat failure as shameful, weakness as unforgivable. Watching him learn to forgive himself was like watching a bird learn to fly after years in a cage. Awkward, painful, and breathtakingly beautiful. One night, a storm rolled in from the mountains. Not an ordinary storm, but something touched by distant magic. The wind howled like wounded animals, and rain lashed against the windows in sheets so thick we could barely see the trees beyond. Kale sat by the hearth, shadows pooling at his feet, eyes distant. They found the outer wards, he said quietly. My stomach clenched. How do you know? I can feel them testing the boundaries, probing for weaknesses. His jaw tightened. They're still miles away, but they're coming. I crossed the room and sat beside him, close enough that our shoulders touched. Then we fight. He turned to look at me, and in the firelight, his expression was raw. Fear and fury and something else, something fragile that he rarely let me see. I can't lose you, he said. I would burn the world to ash before I let that happen. Then don't lose me. I took his face in my hands, forcing him to meet my gaze. We faced this together. No more running. No more hiding. Together. His eyes glistened. You don't know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. I pressed my forehead against his. I'm asking you to trust me. The way I trusted you when you were a broken child in the snow. The way you trusted me when you let yourself fall asleep in my arms. A shudder ran through him. Then his hands came up to cover mine, holding them against his face as if I were something precious. I trust you, he whispered, with everything I am. Outside, the storm raged. But inside our small house in the heart of the forest, there was only warmth and the quiet certainty of two people who had chosen each other against all odds. The coven would come. War would follow. Nothing about the future was guaranteed. But for now, in this moment, we had each other. And that was enough.